Hello and welcome to Just Have a Think. I'm Dave Borlace, and in today's programme I'm going to try to understand the size and scope of the whole spectrum of activities in our everyday lives that are influenced by and have an influence on the environment and climate change. It's such a vast and complicated area, where on earth do you start? I hear you ask. Good question. Well, let's start with the top brass, shall we? And have a look at what the United Nations has got to say about it all. The UN and our governments officially adopted these 16 Sustainable Development Goals in January 2016, but in March 2018 the Secretary-General delivered a stinging press conference in which he expressed his real disillusionment with the political progress around the world.
The truth is that the most systemic threat to humankind remains climate change. And I'm beginning to wonder how many more alarm bells must go off before the world rises to the challenge.
But as you know, this channel is also about discovering how each of us can make our own individual positive impact. So I've decided to start with what you might call the low-hanging fruit. In other words, the things that are really quick and easy for us to do straight away. UN Sustainable Development Goal number 7 is affordable and clean energy. And even that's too big a subject to cover in a single programme. So let's just have a think about home energy. Home electricity and heating accounts for 1/4 of all CO2 emissions, far more than transport as you can see here, but incidentally only slightly more than agriculture and food, something we'll come back to in future weeks. As a nation, we spent 25 billion quid on home energy in 2016, so although you might not think you can make a difference on your own, collectively, if everyone moved their money to green energy suppliers, the Big Six would be compelled to speed up their move away from fossil fuels. This guy is called Dale Vince. He looks a bit like a New Age traveller, and that's exactly what he was back in the 80s. But during his travelling days, he saw the potential for generating his own power from wind turbines, and in the face of absolutely overwhelming odds, he set up the company that's now successfully trading as Ecotricity. For this achievement, Dale received an OBE, and I'm sure he'll be even more delighted to learn that today he also takes pride of place as the first of the geniuses to feature on our chart. Nice one, Dale. Oh, and by the way, he also owns Forest Green Rovers Football Club, who got promoted to the Football League last year, so watch out for them in the Premiership in about 4 years' time. Now, although Ecotricity were arguably the first renewable supplier in the UK, today there's a whole host of competitors in what is a rapidly growing market, so there's never been a better time for you to switch to renewable energies for your own home. Whether you own or rent your home, chances are you spend a good chunk of your hard-earned money on heat and power. So if you haven't already done so, here's how quick and easy it is to switch to renewables. I'm assuming you've all got one of these or something similar. If not, alright, someone you know will have one. It's a computer. Anyway, you go online, you type in something like renewable energy suppliers, and you get all the usual brokers like Uswitch, Money Supermarket, Compare the Meerkat, all that lot, plus a few less well-known comparison sites, any of which will enable you to easily compare tariffs. I'm using a site called Simply Switch, but obviously the choice is completely yours. So enter your postcode in there and press compare now. You do need to know the numbers that are on your gas meter and your electricity meter, and that is on your gas bill and your electricity bill. What would you like to compare? In this case we're going to compare gas and electricity. Are your tariffs of the same supplier? Yes, they are. I'm already with Bulb and they're already a green energy supplier, so I'm not expecting to find too much saving here, but just for the purposes of the example, I spend about 60 quid a month on electric and I spend about 60 quid a month on gas. Tell me who you are, and immediately it brings up all the suppliers who can supply you with green electricity and gas and the comparison in savings that you may make a year. Pick the tariff that suits you best, follow the link, and after you've done a bit of clicking and agreeing at the relevant website, you literally have nothing else to do. There's no physical work to do, no one needs to come to your property, they take care of everything, including contacting your existing supplier, arranging the changeover, and in some cases even paying any exit fees you might incur. It really is dead easy, and coverage is pretty much everywhere now, and you might even save a bit of money, so there's no excuse for contemplating your navel on this one, you just need to get on and do it. Just a quick note on green gas. It does sound a bit like a contradiction in terms, doesn't it? And I'll do a more in-depth look at this in a later programme. But it's basically gas that comes from things like food waste, agricultural activities, domestic and industrial waste water treatment, and municipal solid waste and landfill. All done in accordance with what's called the UK's renewables obligation. Right, now it's time to have a look at this week's WTF board. Last week we left it with these three topics to delve further into. I need to add green gas to the list, and also the recent snowy weather has prompted a few people to ask about the jet stream, the water cycle, and something called the polar vortex. So they're going to go on there as well, and we'll have a look at one or two of those next week. This week though, let's just have a think about the carbon cycle. All living things are made of carbon, and most of the fuels that we use for energy are primarily made of carbon, including the food we eat.
I like carrots.
Yeah.
And steak.
Alright. The carbon on our planet is held in various storage reservoirs, under the ground, in permafrost, in rocks and oceans, and in our atmosphere.
I dropped my carrots.
If you took all the water out of your body...
Oh, come on.
Sorry, Silas. Carbon would make up about half of what was left. Plants and vegetation provide a large reservoir for carbon. Plant life absorbs carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and uses it to produce energy through photosynthesis. The carbon in these plants then either gets respired back into the atmosphere, eaten by animals, or retained by the plant to build its physical structure, and then returned to the earth when the plant dies. Over millions of years, more and more vegetation dies and gets compressed together to form the deposits that we call fossil fuels. Humans have got extremely skilled at digging up these fossil fuels in the form of coal, oil and natural gas, and burning them to fuel pretty much every activity in the Western industrialised world. A particularly impactful modern phenomenon is the widespread clearing of forestry land for human food production, especially beef. Cattle are big animals and they need a lot of space and food and water to live. As they digest their food, their belching and farting releases loads of methane into the atmosphere. Global beef farming currently puts about 2 billion tonnes of methane into the atmosphere every year. One of the most significant carbon reservoirs on our planet is our oceans. Carbon dioxide dissolves very easily in water. In the oceans, it's used in photosynthesis by phytoplankton, which are the basis of the marine food chain. It's also used to make the calcium carbonate shells of all types of marine creatures. Much like land vegetation, when marine organisms die, they settle on the seafloor, pile up and get compressed over millions of years, and eventually form rocks like limestone. Humans make cement by heating limestone at very high temperatures. The global production of cement has grown very rapidly in recent years, and after fossil fuels and land use change, it's the third largest source of human carbon dioxide emissions. According to the IPCC, for every tonne of cement produced, there's 1¼ tonnes of CO2 released. So that's 5.2 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions released into the atmosphere. Total CO2 emissions from all other human activity was 36 billion tonnes. So cement production accounted for well over 10% of all human emissions. Our atmosphere is nothing more than a 30-mile-high strip of gases separating the surface of our planet, where we live, from the freezing cold vacuum of space, where we wouldn't.
Okay, we've had a problem here.
Carbon dioxide absorbs infrared radiation leaving the surface of Earth and re-emits it in all directions. Some heat radiation does escape into space, but most of it is bounced back down to the Earth. We spew 40 billion tonnes of CO2 into the atmosphere every year, which otherwise would have stayed locked up in the reservoirs of the planet. CO2 is only actually about 1% of total atmospheric gases, so there only needs to be a small variation to produce quite a dramatic change. Our climate is not as stable as we'd like it to be, and our ever-increasing human population is right now throwing all the delicate balances completely out of kilter. That's why we all need to understand what's happening and just start to have a think about what we can do to minimise our own impact. Little bit ranty at the end there, sorry about that. Anyway, that's it for this week. If you've enjoyed watching the programme, please do click the red subscribe button. It's absolutely free to do that, and it's by far the best way to raise the profile of the channel with the YouTube search algorithmy spider things. and hopefully get the word out to as many people as possible. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good week, and remember to just have a think. See you next week.
It makes me feel dirty.
Oh, don't be silly, Silas.